According to a recent article in Relevant magazine, millennials are leading the charge in a non-sexual revolution. Parents and pastors have been waiting for years for abstinence to make a comeback, and it appears that their prayers are being answered. The article revealed a few other studies, which said that 40% of current college students are virgins. 1 in 3 20-somethings on Match.com are virgins, and overall, the general population of millennials are having less sex than their boomer and Gen X predecessors. Of course, speculations are numerous as to why the decline in premarital sex, but many seem to circle around the idea that the forbidden fruit has become somewhat of a cultural norm. Once everybody is doing it, literally, it kind of loses its rebellious countercultural appeal. Millennials seem a little more cautious overall with things like careers and finances, so maybe our willingness to bear it all physically with someone is equally as conservative. Now, this doesn't neglect that lots of millennials are coming out of the closet, questioning their sexual orientation, and choosing to cohabitate. But there is a growing population in which purity is making a comeback. Regardless of what stage of young adulthood you're in, whether you're single, dating, engaged, or even married, maintaining purity is a struggle. There's something in our hearts that's unfulfilled. There's something longing for companionship and intimacy that's echoing deep in our souls. We were made for relationship, and we look to satisfy that yearning in whatever's available. The world offers a buffet of instant gratifiers, but the last 30 years of consumption have shown us just how dissatisfying that can be. In the next few minutes, I want to explore one beatitude from Matthew 5:8, and it says this: "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." And I want to look at purity in all 3 relational phases of young adulthood: single, dating or engaged, and married. Being single is not easy. In fact, God himself said that it wasn't good that man was alone. There's a major increase in young adults choosing to live a single life, and there's a significant increase in the average age of both men and women upon marriage. Our single years are lasting longer than they used to, and many young adults are choosing to live that way in response to a calling from God. I want to focus specifically on those who are single but have the desire to marry, because I think there are some unique challenges in purity for them. We're a deeply communal people, and we're hardwired for companionship. The garden narrative echoes deep in our soul, and we long to share the breath and body we've been given with another person. Single young adults have to manage the desire of their heart with the reality of their singleness. I like how Andy Stanley says in the New Rules for Love, Sex, and Dating that our season of singleness is an opportunity to become the healthiest version of ourselves. He says that we'll never be in a relationship that's healthier than we are. In our season of singleness, we're tempted to shortcut the transformative work that God is doing. Mark 7, verses 20 to 23 reminds me that whatever is inside of the heart is going to manifest in my life. If I'm sick in the heart, then I'll spread a virus with my life. We speak and behave according to what's inside. Impure behaviors like escaping into porn, masturbating, even just speaking crudely reveal that something's amiss in our hearts. The season of singleness is our opportunity to become the type of person that we would want to be intimate with. When the gospel of Jesus gets into our hearts and his purifying work begins to transform us, we gain the ability to say no to our selfish desires for immediate gratification. We become men and women marked by self-control and patience, or as the old King James says, long-suffering. But Matthew 5 reminds us that this purity leads to blessing. Purity, when forged in a season of singleness, is a highly attractive quality. But once we've got someone on the hook, whether it's a dating relationship or serious enough to move to an engagement, new challenges to our purity arise. While we've found a companion, we now want intimacy more than ever. We begin to feel a false security. This is most often where the bases imagery comes into play, and young adults start asking the question, how far is too far? Most of us focus this imagery on the physical dimension of our relationships, but I think the same passage from Mark 7 gives us a more comprehensive picture of the heart struggle for purity in a pre-marriage relationship. Our hearts are like mission control for our whole life. Mark 7 shows us that from the heart we get a variety of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The gospel message of Jesus is a life-transforming message. He wants all of us. That's why it's important to monitor purity in all aspects of a pre-marriage relationship. So let's go back to the bases for a moment and use that imagery. But let's expand our thinking to include our thought life, our emotional life, our social life, and our spiritual life. Now let's say that you're in a relationship that is progressing nicely. You like them and they like you. You begin to think about your future together. Your thought life is now rounding first and heading for second. You like the way that makes you feel, so you start to talk about it with one another. Luckily, the feelings are reciprocated, and the next few dates start to feel very different. You can see how your emotional investment now has you standing on second base, taking the lead. Because you're developing a trust with one another, you decide to take the person home and introduce them to your family and friends over a holiday. A couple times in, this becomes normalized, and then it's actually expected that you'll be together for these events, and now you're sliding safely into third base. Add to all of this a spiritual home run of doing devotions together, going to church together, serving in the same areas, maybe even praying together one-on-one, and it's no wonder you want to have sex with this person. So often, we're strictly monitoring our physical boundaries with one another while allowing every other dimension of the relationship to progress toward intimacy. Then we get mad at God for making us wait this long when God says, I just designed you as a complex being whose intimacy would be enhanced by that integrated design. I didn't say that you needed a college degree, an established job, and a mortgage before you could get married. So what's the point here? When we have a trusted companion, purity in a pre-marriage relationship means that we're constantly assessing whether or not we're willing to risk the next level of intimacy. As we progress in one dimension, we have to understand that our souls are going to long to progress in others. Purity in a relationship allows for trust to develop. It's an active service to cautiously turn from one base to the next. Couples who practice this type of relationship are constantly communicating to one another, let me serve you. Not by pleasuring you or meeting this desire for immediate gratification, but by honoring your dignity and worth as a human. In fact, no couple that has maintained strong purity in their pre-marriage relationships has ever told me that they wished they had been more experienced or further along before marrying one another. On the flip side, the amount of pre-marriage baggage that most couples carry takes years of marriage to overcome. Finally, and much more briefly, I want to touch on purity in young adult marriages. It's amazing how quickly this thing that we've waited for so long to experience can become unsatisfying. The number of divorces and infidelity within the first 5 years of millennial marriages is alarming. Matthew 5 says that the pure in heart are blessed and happy, but many young marriages end because the partners are unhappy. As a married couple, purity forces us to make the necessary sacrifices to cultivate deeper intimacy. Fantasy and comparison are the escapist behaviors that diminish the intimacy shared between a husband and wife. More often than not, it's the husband who's given to fantasy and the wife who's discouraged by comparison, but that's not universal. The proverbial rut settles in sooner than most young adults imagine it will. This is where the fruit of singleness is revealed. Either the husband and wife have the habits and disciplines necessary to focus on their marriage, or they begin to fall into the same patterns that dating and marriage could only mask for a time. The perk of marriage is that you have a new partner in the battle who literally embodies the gospel of grace to your heart. And while intimacy struggles must be dealt with sensitivity, the covenant formed in marriage is an umbrella of transformative grace. When a man and woman commit to cultivate deeper intimacy by maintaining purity, they give one another an unbelievable gift. Much like fine wines, the intimacy experience between a husband and wife only gets better with age. But like those wines, the intimacy must be protected from outside contaminants. Andy Stanley reminds us that exclusivity, not experience, is the fuel of romance. By honoring our marriage commitments, we create the environment for intimacy to thrive. So give up the fantasies and embrace the beautiful reality of your spouse. And stop comparing so that you can focus on crafting a lifetime of intimacy together. Millennials are on the right track in terms of reclaiming the role of purity in healthy relationships. Only the love of God firmly rooted in our hearts will give us the strength to maintain purity in all of its dimensions in all of our seasons of young adulthood. Jesus promises that the pure in heart will be blessed. Purity is not a prison that Christians are sentenced to. Purity is the pathway by which we experience true and deep intimacy. The Garden of Eden gives us a picture of a man and woman who were naked and unashamed. My prayer is that millennials will pave the way for the next generation, a generation that includes my daughters, to practice purity. I pray that this growing group of young people who see the blessing of pure hearts will change the relational landscape of our churches, our communities, and our world. And I look forward to the day that our world will experience nakedness without shame.